Hi everyone. The big news, of course, at the moment is the attempted assassination of the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico. Now, I may make a video specifically on that, so bear with me. Time permitted, I may cover that, or I may encompass it as part of another video. We'll see how things turn out. The latest news is his condition has improved. It's no longer thought that his life is on the line, but clearly a dramatic incident. Anyway, this is not really anything to do with that. It seems quite trivial by comparison, but it's, I think, got implications in terms of how microaggressions really is defined, and how that is often used by hypersensitive people to weaponize communication. Basically, it's an interesting report. It's from the Daily Mail. Now, I don't agree with everything the Daily Mail comes out with, certainly. It wouldn't necessarily be my go to, but I will say this: they will cover stuff like this in the way that you will not see in The Guardian or The Independent, the Eye, I should say. So, credit where credit's due. They do cover stuff like this, and it's important as a talking point. So, the report's by Tom Cottrell. It's not racist to chat about sushi with a Japanese colleague. I'll just read out the whole report so you have the whole context. And then, as always, I'll share my thoughts on it. A Japanese academic who tried to sue a British university for racism after her boss told her that she liked sushi has had her case thrown out after a tribunal judge described her as hypersensitive. Professor Nana Sato-Rossberg accused Provost Claire Ozane, that's Ozanne, of being prejudiced, claiming she would not have said to a German, "I like sausage." But employment judge Gillian Brown found senior academic Professor Ozane just making small talk, and no reasonable person would have taken offence. Of course they wouldn't have. Professor Sato-Rossberg was found to have been predisposed to finding fault with Professor Ozane, who previously been accused of unconsciously biased against her, who she had previously accused of being unconsciously biased against her. It meant the culture and linguistics experts' claim of racial discrimination and harassment against the School of the Oriental and African Studies in London were rejected. The hearing was told Professor Sato-Rossberg started teaching at the university in 2014, and 5 years later was appointed a department head. In 2020, Professor Ozane, an insect specialist who calls herself the Muddy Boots biologist, was appointed deputy director and provost and became her manager. After the first meeting, Professor Sato-Rossberg told a colleague she thought Professor Ozane would be biased because she was not British and was a woman in BAME. She would be biased because she was not British and was a woman in BAME. That's her take on it. The central, it doesn't say what Professor Ozane's background is. That's Ozanne. She looks like a white woman to me in the picture. But anyway, the Central London Tribunal heard that in September 2021, Professor Ozane told her about a sushi restaurant near her home, which her family enjoyed. Professor Sato-Rossberg took exception, saying that Professor Ozane would not have said to a German person, "I like sausage." Professor Sato-Rossberg said, "We have many commonalities through our work, but she chose to speak only about topics directly relevant to my race." Over the next 6 months, Professor Sato-Rossberg continued to complain, and in January 22 she mailed university bosses accusing her of bullying and harassment. She declared, "Professor Ozane tries to suppress my voice, the voice of a woman of colour," and later claimed she had exhibited racist microaggression. In February last year, a university investigation rejected her claims. She then took SOAS to the tribunal, claiming race discrimination, race harassment, victimization, and unfair treatment for whistleblowing. Rejecting her case, Judge Brown said Professor Sato-Rossberg had decided Professor Ozane was prejudiced against her without evidence from the start. The judge added she was predisposed to see race discrimination when there was none. Of the sushi remark, the judge added Professor Ozane was making small talk. This was one conversation of many about many different subjects over the course of 18 months. A reasonable person would not take offence. Her objection reflected her own hypersensitivity and predisposition to find fault with Miss Ozane. Okay, so a few things to talk about here. Firstly, it's good that common sense has prevailed. I'm pleased that the court found against this ridiculous complaint. Um, Fair play to Judge Brown for saying that. But I can't help but feel, this happened in September 2021, the comment. That means that Claire O'Zane has had 3 years, almost 3 years of this hanging over her. That's a disgrace. I think Nana Sato-Rossberg needs to get over herself. She needs to take a reflection and consider if she is really a victim or if she's indeed being hypersensitive. Because I think most people would say that she is. But I actually would say it's worse than being hypersensitive. It's actually being quite obnoxious. Because weaponizing that to try and smear a colleague, to try and basically ruin their career, it's pathetic. And I've noticed that this sort of attitude often comes from academic circles, supposedly intelligent people who are really making a mountain out of a molehill. Now, I'd be prepared to play the devil's advocate if it was sort of like, let's say, banter that went too far and it was constantly focused on her ethnicity. But my goodness, making small talk, saying that you like sushi and you're talking to a Japanese person, how the hell can that be seen as racial discrimination? But to be honest, this is one of those things that woke dogmatics come up with, microaggressions. I think most of it is nonsense, to be quite honest. Now, I've experienced a situation where, because of my accent, people have immediately sort of went in and said, "Oh, I was in Ireland once," and yeah, I get it. It can be quite irritating when I say actually I'm from Northern Ireland, I've grown up in England, and then they persist. It is kind of annoying, but I wouldn't dream of going to an employment tribunal. I wouldn't dream of suing someone for that. It's just, if Sato Rosberg was annoyed by this, she could have voiced her annoyance. But she sounds like a professional victim. She sounds like a crybaby. She sounds like a rather obnoxious individual who would be very difficult to work with. In fact, she sounds like a nightmare. And so it's good that common sense has prevailed. I also hope if there's any costs that have come from this, in pushing the case, all the costs are put on Sato Rosberg since she lost the case. I hope that the school doesn't have to pay up anything, and I hope that Claire O'Shane doesn't have to pay any legal costs. I think the burden should be put entirely on Sato Rosberg for being a crybaby and for trying to smear her colleague over nothing. Let's be very clear here. This wasn't some sort of racist joke or, persistent racist bullying. This was an innocent comment that this person chose to take out of context and make to be a much bigger thing than it is. Um, so it's one of those things, I think that really needs to be challenged. So this case is good, but I just hope every employment tribunal would see the same level of common sense. It shouldn't have got to that stage, you know. I imagine it was very stressful for Claire O'Shane to have to, have this weighing over her. I don't know what it would have meant if she had to pay a fine or, if it would have cost her a job. But no doubt for years, is this, like I say, it was September 2021, this supposedly happened. For years, she would have been having to put up with this. Sato-Rossberg should do herself a favour and maybe go somewhere where she can be wrapped in cotton wool and not be such a crybaby. Um, I mean, this is an academic, yet she's acting like really in such she's acting like a child, just trying to look for reasons to be offended or complain about something. I've come across a few people in my life like that where you feel like you're walking on eggshells around them. I remember once I asked some guys. I mean, actually, this thing about where someone is from, some people choose to get sensitive about that. I've never understood that. I think if it's done in an aggressive way, like where are you from, as opposed to oh where have you come from kind of thing, as part of making conversation. No different than asking what sort of food someone likes or what sort of music or um, so what do you do in this department? It's a basic part of human communication, and if the person chooses not to answer, that's up to them. But I think running to an employment tribunal, you're trying to sue a colleague over that is disgraceful. And she's done herself no favors, Sato Roseberg I'm talking about, because people are going to look at this and think she's a difficult person to work with. Um, and it's totally unnecessary. I really feel sorry for Claire O'Shea and having to put up with that. Um, but I think it should send out a message. I'm not saying this one case will change everything, but it should send out a message that, microaggressions is not, it's not discrimination, it's not bullying, it's not violence, it's a norm thing, quite frankly. If someone is saying something that's kind of annoying and you've told them and they continue to do it, just tell them, just correct them or something. But it's one of those terms, like mansplaining, white privilege, microaggressions is one of these woke terminologies that is so toxic because it's just weaponized and it's used to try and get people walking on eggshells. It's used to it's hypersensitivity over language, and I think it's actually it's worse than being just pathetic. It's actually an assault on freedom of expression because if people constantly have to watch what they say, then you could have a totally innocent comment, and if this tribunal had went the other way and found that she was a victim, that would have very sinister connotations. Well, luckily the judge had her head screwed on and didn't see it that way. I'm not sure if that would be the case in every employment tribunal, but hopefully it would. So, my message to Nana Sato-Rossberg is she should step back a little bit, have a little bit of modesty, get over her ego and think, am I really a victim here? There's real victims out there, people who actually have a reason to complain. This is not one of them. She needs to get over herself, reflect on, is there not more important things, at getting on with her work, rather than looking for reasons to be offended. I imagine she's probably got a reputation for herself as a very difficult person, and the fact that she was persistently complaining suggests, it adds a weight to that. So it's a useful case. I just hope every employment tribunal has the same level of common sense. I don't know if they would, but when I read about things like this, I work freelance and I'm often grateful that I do because I often think in that sort of work dynamic, I'm a good team player. There's been situations where I have done that and I've never had any problems. But I can imagine if you're working in an office with someone who's looking for reason to be offended, looking for microaggressions. I mean, my God, it's just like. Actually, I interrupted myself earlier. I was going to give an anecdote. When I was at university, I met some guys from Brooklyn, and I actually, like I could hear the accent. I was just curious. I said, "Oh, where are you guys from?" I said, "Why do you want to know?" And I was like, "Just asking." And then they said they were from Brooklyn, and it was like they were African American guys, and they just seemed a bit like. But I was genuinely just making small talk. It was a party, and I thought, "Whoa, chill." Um, I mean, in my experience, I've had people say things to me that I do find a bit annoying when I've told them. One that I've often had is, "Oh, I went to Ireland once." That doesn't mean anything to me. I've grown up in England and I'm from Northern Ireland, but I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to report them to the police, or if I was in a work environment, I wouldn't, it's just people like that who are that hypersensitive really need to get over themselves. It's different if someone is being bullied. That I do see a difference where there's banter that goes too far, or someone's constantly being teased, that sort of thing. That's different. But my goodness, making small talk and saying that you enjoy sushi, it absolutely is not racist, and it reminds me of those Chinese nationals who had a go at the heinous Brendan Kavanagh, and they tried to use the race card. I think people who use the race card when it doesn't exist, they're guilty of undermining actual racism, or by making an issue over nothing, they're distracting from actual racism, and they're also guilty of weaponizing trivial things. I really have a problem with people like that. That's why when people, when I hear someone is a sensitive person, I don't feel sorry for them. I think I'll watch that person, you know, because they will take anything out of context. They will look for reasons to be offended.